The DC cinematic universe, with one exception, has been a series of misfires and downright incompetent and incoherent examples of terrible filmmaking started and foundationally structured by Zack Snyder, who was easily one of the worst directors Warner Brothers could have chosen to let build this thing from the ground up. Though I think Man of Steel is a flawed film, mostly in its unnecessary use of distracting handheld and close-ups and this mind-numbing assault on your senses, also known as his third act, I don't think it's the worst thing ever, but Batman v Superman as its follow-up was a colossal disappointment, proving once and for all that DC was due for a serious course correction. Suicide Squad just sucked, and it had the built-in excuse of studio meddling, completely butchering the film and editing, but honestly, due to the sheer amount of ill-conceived ideas and wrong-headed decisions at the core of its so-called narrative, I don't think there was some truly great film that the masses missed out on. And Wonder Woman following that up was actually good, mostly because of the fact that its timeline allowed it to stand on its own, far away from the mess made by every other entry in this franchise, and the director wasn't a tone-deaf hack, desperate to make something terrible. And that brings me to Justice League. Justice League is bad, and I mean really bad. And sure, it has the same technical issues that plagued the previous installments, such as god-awful green screen, and I do mean god-awful green screen, and editing choices that are downright confusing when you consider the fact that this is a fucking blockbuster. But perhaps the biggest issue I have with the Justice League is the fact that it shows just how incompetent and disconnected from the fans DC actually is. Instead of just making an interesting and well-written and directed film, they demanded that the movie be under 2 hours long after it was already in production, and they figured, hey, let's add some jokes because levity has been our problem this entire time, completely missing the fact that the problems have been studio meddling, terrible sensibilities, and jumbled and messy storytelling comparable to grade school children adapting Final fucking Crisis or the Flashpoint Paradox. Now I know, this movie will have its fans, and that's totally fine. I'll never tell anyone not to like something. I'm not a snob. But from a critical standpoint, I just don't see how this is anything more than a terrible, cartoony, convoluted carbon copy of the Avengers with one of the most bland and uninteresting villains put to screen in years. Seriously, Steppenwolf makes Hela from Thor Ragnarok look like Darth fucking Vader. That bad. Now I will say, while I thoroughly disliked Justice League, I didn't hate myself while watching it. It didn't have the shallow, pseudo-philosophical pretentiousness of Batman v Superman or the manufactured, studio-mandated artificial pop aesthetic of Suicide Squad, so I didn't cringe as much. It's just an incredibly boring and poorly made action spectacle that from its very first frame cannot wait to end. Seriously, this thing wants to be over from the first time you see Superman's fucking fake upper lip, I promise you. Structurally, this thing is barely even a movie, with pacing so bad that it's hard to distinguish between the three acts, and it has the same issue that Batman v Superman had with its scenes, giving them a sense of isolation and distance from basically anything that preceded them in the story, making them feel like cool moments stitched together for and by fanboys with no regard for the integrity of the narrative outside of weaponized intertextual imagery that served no real purpose for anyone not solely interested in seeing things that they simply recognize. As for characters, Wonder Woman is good, as usual. Ben Affleck looks like he just doesn't want to be there. Jason Momoa's Aquaman wasn't as annoying as I thought it would be, but that's because they aggressively undercut him in this movie. He literally has nothing to do for the majority of his screen time. Cyborg is boring as shit, and Flash is okay. The score is bland and unimpactful, which is actually a step down from BVS, so there's that. And the special effects range from passable to downright awful. Like PlayStation 2 cutscene bad, and that's not hyperbole, I promise you. Overall, this is yet another example of Warner Brothers shooting itself in the foot, and I wouldn't care if they blew this whole thing up at this point, and that sucks. It sucks that this movie sucks, because there was a lot of potential to course correct and do something great with this universe, but they just didn't. And as much as I would love for some of my favorite characters to act as kind of a counterbalance to Marvel, it just didn't happen this time, and I give Justice League a 3, maybe 4 out of 10. Thanks for watching. I'm Lee, and I'm a fake critic.